experience, right? And life science companies will be gearing up. It is doing a lot in basically delivering the timely, real-time content by using various technologies. So we would like to start a conversation with our rescue panel to understand the challenges in content supply chain. So what are the challenges which we see in the content supply chain, how we are addressing that, how we are using technologies, how we are using artificial intelligence, machine learning in content, targeting right content to the right audience. So we will be covering all these topics in today's discussion. And to start off with, I think the first is, which we talked a lot about, reuse of the content. We've been using a lot of content across different channels. We have multiple channels now. Earlier it used to be only on web channels. Now we have multiple digital channels. And most of the channels are delivering the same content. So how we are reusing or reinventing or reinventing the content in this. So let me start with James. So James, what do you do in the organization? How are your organization, or how do you see the companies in China have been reusing the global content or reusing the local content for different channels?
Good afternoon. So basically, I think the needs of the multiple and very diversified content, the needs is getting bigger and bigger. So traditionally, so when we're talking about reusing the content, which mainly coming from the perspective of cost efficiency or in terms of the consistency of quality. But now, if you look at the context in China, actually we have so many different channels, and also in terms of the different channels, we will need a different format and different kinds of the content. So, which means we cannot only coming from the cost perspective or the consistency perspective. Now is the real need for us to think about. So, what is the better way we can really reuse the content to maximize reach to our target customers. So in UCB, actually, we are adopting the similar concept like the digital factory. So traditionally, when we talk about engagement and communication, we usually start from the customer segmentation, positioning, then define the clear message. But everything is starting from the messages once. So we need to look into the different channels. So determines what kind of the format which is suitable for that channels. So if we use in a traditional way, so different brand team may working with the different agencies. If I borrow the term from consumer goods industry, is in the creative agencies. So there are so many creative agencies and brand teams to create the different assets and reside in the multiple different areas. So now it's more importantly to think about, so what is actually the value or the essence which creative agency can create? So basically that's the idea. So how to package the message you want to communicate. However, if you look at the production means that we don't necessarily rely on each individual brand or the creative agency to produce the content. We can actually centralize. To centralize, so which means we can get the cost efficiency, of course, but at the same time we can also store or collect all the assets in-house together. So which means once we're talking about reuse, so that will be much easier. We don't need to spend the efforts to contact the different brand teams or to contact the different creative agencies to get the materials and try to adapt it. But if we can integrate it in a consolidated way and in a common space, so actually that can make the reuse and a really kind of the practical way to implement in current China market.
I think James, very well. So you talked about using your ad agencies, using your creative agencies to do a creative work and centralizing the production part of it, which will help you in reusing the same content and also reusing the same creative content into different channels. Exactly. If you centralize it. So do you agree with Victor with what you also see the same trends which is happening in China? Because what we've been seeing is you have a structure within the organization, different BUs, every BU works with the different agencies to different content productions, and not only different BUs, different agencies, but different channels and different agencies also exist. So this makes things much more complicated within the organization, right?
Yes, indeed, with the multiplication of digital channels and also the multiplication of digital interaction, we can feel that there's going to be a big increase in terms of numbers of pieces of content that needs to be created, then we need to have this in mind to put in place a structure to make this happen in a disciplined way. So just at China level, not even entering into the global, local, marketing discussion. At China level, what we can see already is that some BUs having the same customers or the same products will not reuse across BUs those content. And even within a BU, due to also the natural, marketing turnover, which can be up to 20-25%, each new marketer will reinvent the wheel and not build on what has already been produced in an environment where doctors are just as us. Maybe they can hear the same message 4 or 6 times during the year and not remember about it. So I think already on those dimensions there is a lot to do. And to your point, it can be about reusing across channels some same pieces of content, getting very organized into aggregating them. I would add to it that the main challenge that we're facing right now is about also how to tag the content, because even if people want to try and find, just at a given point in time what the other BU do or what someone has done before, how we organize this in a smart way and tag it in a smart way is going to be key for our users.
So Alex, would you like to add anything more, like recent technologies, how technologies have been helping? One of the points which Victor mentioned about the tagging. Tagging is the one area where the technologies definitely can help.
Yeah, definitely that's something that we've seen a change in the industry where there's a difficulty with tagging. Tagging takes up so much of the content development's time to make sure every piece of content is tagged with the right message and the right piece of information. And that becomes a blocker to getting the content out there. And actually ties into what we're talking about today. One of the changes we've seen slowly in the industry is some kind of AI or artificial intelligence aiding in that development process, just based on the messaging and the information in the HTML to provide those tagging kind of recommendations. Because let's face it, nobody wants to be told exactly what is going to be put on a piece of content. The marketers still want to determine that, but providing them a list of suggestions based on what's in the content is something that AI seems to be taking space in the industry.
Henry, I know you guys have been doing a lot of work in this space. How the data, because when we come to the tagging, you need to have a data to tag the right content to the right. First is tag the right content, and then using that content for the right customer, right? So data becomes a very important part of it in driving the whole cycle. How do you see and what your organization has been trying to do in this space?
Yeah, my organization at Kana, we have content suggestions. We try to use machine learning to learn about how the HCPs are reacting and responding to the content, right? But in reality, right, I think if we have all the pharma companies' data together, we don't have enough data, like Amazon or Taobao, right? We don't have enough data. I think there's a lot of data out there, and this is coming from a couple of general managers of pharma companies I've been speaking to. All the data is really sitting in the reps' stomach, in the doctors, right? And getting that data from the field becomes a big challenge. We have the basic data. We have the master data. We have some data in the CRM, maybe 10%, 20%. That's okay. We have some of the response data from the CRM programs we're running, but there's still a big gap, right? And I think closing this gap is some of the things we need to tackle over the next 10 years. And there's a lot of ways to do it, because what I see is, we go into the field and ask the reps, right? The number one question they always tell me is, I need more content, right? But then if you look at the content repository, there's a lot of content. Nobody knows how to use it, right? And in fact, I think it's kind of like my company. We have a lot of presentations we want to present to all our customers. But as a salesperson, I'm not sure which one to select either, because I don't even know my customer that well, right? I don't know what the barrier is. I don't know what the driver is, right? So the missing link, really this technology that, we're all trying to build together is really about, closing that gap between the strategy and execution. And then we can talk about whether these content and suggestions would really work.
So that brings the question to the technology, how the technology has been helping. So James and Victor, both of you, the organization's been spending a lot on these technologies. You have a content management system, you have digital assets management system, you have so many systems which has been floating around within the organization, and the organization is spending a lot of money in these systems. Are these systems making things more complicated, or has been helping in solving some of these problems?
Let's just start.
I wouldn't say that all those systems would make things complicated, but I think the reality right now is how we can make the content effectively delivered to our target customers. So I think that's the major challenge, because I don't think our customer-facing employees, there are lack of content. So actually there are lots of the content, but how we can tell them when is the right timing, so which is the right channel to deliver which particular content, I think that is the current biggest the challenge. So my view in terms of all the tools, actually we are in a journey of the omni-channel. So my personal view is to divide the journey into 3 stages. So the first stage is about precision. The second stage is about prediction. The third stage is about automation. So I believe now we are in the precision stage. So just borrowing the taking strategy Alex just shared. So there are existing very mature technologies can help us to identify the customers, understand better customer behaviors, and also to take in the different content to help us to precisely communicate the content we want to have. So tool-wise, that is all right. But regarding the prediction, I believe that is the tool probably we are lack of so far. So if we have the tool, but at the same time there is also another challenge. So whether we can engage our customer-facing reps, the value of the prediction tool. So I think that would be a stage the system may make things a little bit complicated. So how to make them convinced the value which we can create. So I believe that would be a challenge we are going to see.
So Victor, just to add more on this, is definitely these technology as a standalone do make sense, do solve particular problem. But when it comes to the organization, when you see things are a little bit more complicated, and it's not about archiving, it's not about that, there are multiple other things which is involved in that. What's your experience when it comes to this digital asset management or content management systems?
So I think in terms of technology, at least from Sanofi standpoint, we've been much focused on the channels part, and to some extent on the data part. But on the content journey, we're more beginning. So basically, we put together some kind of pipes, which are the channel, and data is fueling part of it. And we don't meet the content field, but we're beginning to address the content issue. So in that sense, it's an opportunity because we're setting it up right now. So we have the opportunity to use this kind of thing. But what I feel is that when it comes to those technologies, specifically when it's going to be related to content, our users need to understand how it works. Also for us to feed it with a good hypothesis. So if we just leapfrog directly to some kind of machine learning technology, it's just going to be a black box, and people are not going to the guts, the insight are not going to be in there. Whilst if we had a very simple rule, like if 1, 2, 3, then kind of thinking is going to help us have build some more experience as we go.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So do the organization like yours is also working on the machine learning and artificial intelligence in area of content?
In terms of content,
Any examples, yeah.
I think when we go back to, in terms of supply chain of content, we are.
Yeah.
In terms of, I would say, but we're beginning. In terms of content tagging, yes, but not specifically on other areas.
So Alex, how these technologies can automate content generation also? I think we have been working a lot on in terms of using these technologies in automating the content generation, tagging. Can you throw some light on that?
Yeah, so from a machine learning kind of perspective, there is the content tagging, obviously. The key thing for any type of machine learning is you need the data, as Henry was mentioning before. If you don't have the data, you're not going to be able to generate very much out of it. But one of the key things is if you start seeing the response rate to certain types of content, and you feed in that data into the system, the next time you generate content, the tool can help you give suggestions again, or just read a journal article and then based on other content you've developed in the past, spit out some kind of content that could be a baseline for new content. Obviously, this is much more futuristic. It's not going to happen next month or next year even at this point. It's something that's much farther in the future. We've already gone through a shift, and I would love to hear from the rest of the panelists if they agree on this, but if you go back 5 years ago, it was always content is king, we need more content, and I believe James just mentioned this a second ago, but it's gotten to a point now where we have content. It's gotten to a point potentially where a lot of our field reps have too much content. They don't know which piece to use anymore, so we're getting bits and pieces of data here and there, so we can't really drive the insights anymore. Anyways, I'll let somebody else answer that. You guys are in the industry. I've heard this from other clients, and I believe it's the case, but.
So Henry, coming to you, when we say there is too much of content, there's too many content, too many channels, and resulting in information congestions, right?
Yeah.
And non-personalized digital journeys. So how can we optimize this and simplify this process?
I think it's part of the collaboration problem that we try to solve as an organization. You put in the CRM tool, the MCM tool. There's a lot of tools to help you solve the collaboration. But is the change management, is it going to the right people? In my experience, I have one customer who has a really great brand manager who simplifies the content process, right? Eliminates a lot of the older content. So they put in new ones for a quarter period where we tell the rep, hey, this one you need to send by September because the season for whatever is coming, right? And the diagnosis, should come, in October, and then maybe the treatment should come in November. It should be very clear, right? Only 3 messages, but we want to make sure that all the right physicians get targeted, right? And the real targets, right? I don't want the love targets, right? And it's funny when you look at the response, right? Everybody's guessing, oh, maybe the chief physicians are too busy. The response comes, and all the chief physicians actually respond to it better than the practitioners, which came to a surprise, right? And this is the insight that you feed back to marketing and say, hey, right? So I think it's all connected, and it's about change management rather than the tool and the process.
So coming to you, James, content supply chain is still open-ended, where the engagement insights are not being calculated anymore, or we don't use open rate, click rate, are not widely used to optimize the content, right? Then how organizations are optimizing their internal processes? What kind of data and insight they are looking at to optimize the content, content development or content delivery to the SE?
Okay, so if I use the real practice in our company, so of course the omni-channel, including our own channels and also the partner channels. So in China, there are lots of the partner channel like DSY, like eMyTong, all the channels are, which also the channels we're investing in. But if you look at our own channel, the in-house channels, so we're actually using some concepts like the CPC, those kind of the rate. But more importantly is that so how we can really enable our sales rep can really help to increase that kind of rate. So in our practice, actually, the online-offline collaboration is very, very important. So we cannot only rely on the online content delivery kind of the platform or system. Sometimes we still believe that, particularly in China context, the personal kind of engagement, if we may say the relationship, is still quite important. But we don't need sales team, and they actually don't have the privilege to engage the doctors for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, maybe only 3 minutes. But for those 3 minutes, they can really use that 3 minutes to engage the HCPs, to log on our platform, and to briefly introduce the content we want to deliver. So that is kind of the CPC rate of the particular content we want to monitor in terms of on our content platform, and also the active rate of our HCPs. all those measures, KPIs, are set in our system. And more importantly, how to make that successful is we also need to link those kind of KPI with the incentive system. So I think that's the reality, because in my function is the overall operational excellence. So we also design and implement the incentive scheme. So we don't really put too much focus on the sales target achievement right now, particularly in China. So in terms of overall context, the compliance requirement. But we put more and more for other KPIs. For example, we set the one KPI like your target HCPs, the active rate on our platform as a KPI, then we evaluate their incentive. So which means we can really mobilize the sales team through the very, very numbered fact-based KPI, and through our offline sales reps, the efforts can make the online content delivery successful.
So Victor, how organizations like large organizations like Sanofi or in China are optimizing their content and channel using the data?
Yes, sure. Just to close on those two discussions, I was thinking about change management and the fact that KPIs and incentives are a big part of it. But it goes both ways. Basically, that if there isn't the sales rep incentives, of course, it's going to help. If it's in your GM's incentive, it's even better. And that's, for me, that was a key driver for change. So after that, in terms of content management, again, it's more about the process than the tool itself, I guess. And really, we're having a culture shock, basically, between the external context with digital, everything going faster, and teams within pharma, which are very conservative and have as a role to control risk and don't want to let go any part of security of a very fixed process. So we have this gap to fill, and our approach has been quite step by step, I would say. First, on the existing process, try to see in a kind of a lean approach how we could, simplify and shorten some of the steps. But now is about going through regulatory, medical compliance discussions on, from creation to online. How can we together work on a smarter process to make things actually, to make content created and validated within the day? This comes some kind of a vision like this. It's work in progress.
So coming to the last part about the future. What is the future of the content? What are the future areas of investment? And where do you see the content where we are currently is going to go? Where the investment will be done in the companies? So starting from you, Henry. So where do you see? You've been working across the different companies.
Yeah.
What do you see as a trend right now?
I think in the past we're very much focused on what and how. In the future, I see you focusing more on the why. Right? Why should I use this piece of content? Right? What is the insight behind the barrier I'm trying to overcome? And once we understand the why, then when we build the content, the salespeople will be more relative to it, and then the doctors respond better to it. So focusing on that would be a good area of investment.
So James, which is the area which is evolving in your organization?
Yeah. So we talked about AI and machine learning. So I believe machine learning has already been adopted in different domains. But look at AI. So I would prefer saying the intelligence augmentation. So which means we still need to augment or enable our offline sales to give them tools to engage. So that would be the investment we are going to spend. So for example, for the content-wise, automation, I think is our ultimate goal. But whether we can predict the next best action, which I believe, once we can prove that successful, we can really migrate into the automation stage. So if you look at our company's investment, I think the next priority is whether we can get a smart engine, but we'll analyze our internal data to really get out the insight, to really predict the behavior, or the next best approach, or the content to be delivered to our target customers. So that is our priority in terms of the system or the tool investment.
So in another way, if I have to put, is content maturity is also dependent on your digital, in your data maturity, in your technology maturity, in your organization maturity, which you talk about organization change. So all of these things are interlinked together. You cannot see a content on a separately. You need to look at all these. So Victor, what's your thought about this?
I think I'm going to complete with the organization part again. Basically, whatever the tool or the technology you put for the company, there are chances it's a failure if you don't have the support of the top management first, and second, if you don't have the good people. Our main challenge today is about having the right talents in medical for content generation, in marketing, in our corporate functions to drive the change, and then it's going to expand also to the sales rep. What are the reps of the future? What are the kind of ability that we want them to have? It's a search for creativity, entrepreneurship, challenging the status quo, which is totally new to a very conservative, industry like ours. So if there is an investment to make, I think it's an important one. Yes.
So Alex, you've been involved in bringing these high-tech technologies. Where do you see, from a technology perspective, where do you see the challenges? What are the challenges which we are trying to solve? Not you, we are trying to solve as a company.
So I'd say for content in general, it's gone through a cycle. So a lot of things we've talked about, on the panel today about content reuse, consistency of messaging, efficiency of development, whether it's getting through the stodginess of certain industries or certain clients, compliance and legal review process. That's what everybody's going through today. And that started years ago. Some people are a lot more advanced with that than others in terms of actually getting that done. I think the next wave ties into the previous panel. Delivering content that the doctors actually want to see. Today we're just delivering content that we want them to see. It's about the push marketing that we were talking about before. And now about the pull marketing in terms of the content they really want, which also goes into the different types of rep roles out there and moving more away from just purely promotional and more into the scientific and the cell medical side. So that's really where I see the content part going. From a technology perspective, I think that really starts tying into how can you quickly get the content that they want into your user's hands, whether it's using machine learning or artificial intelligence to help generate that content, help tag that content, help push it through the approval process. But I agree, the technology will fail 100% of the time if you don't have the support of your senior management. You need that executive leadership to support it, and then you need the reps to have an incentive to use it. Delivering content that the HCPs want, but the reps don't care about delivering it, well, HCPs are never going to see it. The reps want to be able to, have to be able to deliver it and want to deliver it. If it doesn't directly impact their incentives, they're not going to. So it's a combination of multiple things when it comes to the content segment, I think.
Perfect. So before we end, we would like to take some questions from the audience. Or anybody wants to add some point which we have discussed over here? Yes.
Thank you. So I guess all the panelists are quite aligned on the step 3 to 4 on the content AI. So my question is a little bit more on the step 1, right? Victor, you mentioned that we see the importance. We see the importance of doing that, but jumping from 0 to AI seems like a big leap. And I do think it's very important to get the business rules right in order to have this kind of AI-driven engine. And also, Henry, you mentioned that sometimes we'll be surprised what the physicians will react on the events or the campaign we have. That means how little we know about the physicians. The question being now, do we really trust the data we have right now, right? The physician data, the data that the reps put in on the CRM. And based on those kind of data, how do we make the first step right? It's kind of a chicken and egg question. If I have the right data, we get the right suggestion, but how do we get started?
I have maybe part of the answer. I guess I think for step 0 to 1, the good thing about the numerous channels that we'll have that you will not have just one source of data, but you have maybe 3-4 sources of data. So at one point, the data across the sources doesn't make absolute sense. It's just like they're auditing each other, correct? Because if my CRM tell me A, the champions tell me B, and then I don't know, my MSLs tell me Z, then I know that somewhere something is wrong. So I think it's the beginning of the answer to your question. How we make it automatic? That's another one we can discuss after. But it's a catalyst, basically.
So, Andrew, you want to add on?
No, I completely agree with Victoire, because it is a catalyst, and we want to think about it backwards, right? Instead of complaining, hey, the system sucks, and how do we get it better? We think about how do we make the system better so it doesn't suck, right? And another thing, I kind of like the basketball analogy, right? When we want to try to shoot the basket from a full court, automate it right into the basket, and then maybe the rep, he wants to dribble it right all the way himself because he thinks he's better than the machine. But maybe at some point, initially, maybe you just want to pass it to half court, right? Which probably we're doing right now. Then the rep say, hey, I don't need you to dribble half court. I can do it myself, right? But if you can get them the layup or let them dunk and be superstars, then the rep will be like, hey, this is not too bad, right? I don't have to do all that work. And then, as you get closer and closer to the basket, you could think about maybe I don't need the basketball player anymore. I could just use the gun and just shoot it into the basket, right? So it's definitely, at my company we call this a crawl, walk, run approach. And often we see in pharma, strategy is always running while, the reps are really crawling. So, balancing that is quite challenging, at least for the business I'm in.
Yeah, I think nobody is looking for a maturity from day two, right? So we need to go through the journey. We need to, as you said, we need to crawl and then start running, right?
Yeah.
But we need to have a end vision in the mind. Otherwise, if you don't look at the end vision, you won't start crawling also. You're just sitting at one place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other question? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for your discussion. Thank you.